Between 1945 and 1950, 5 people vanished from the same 1-mile stretch of hiking trail in southern Vermont. An experienced hunting guide, a college sophomore, a war veteran sitting on a bus, an 8-year-old boy, and a grandmother who knew those woods better than anyone alive. Only one body was ever recovered. And where they found it, that's the part that made investigators go quiet. What happened to Frieda Langer's remains would take decades to surface. But we'll get there. Glastenbury Mountain, southern Vermont. If you've never heard of it, there's a reason. The indigenous Abenaki people avoided this place. They didn't build there, didn't hunt there. Their oral tradition held that this particular stretch of the Green Mountains was wrong. A place where all 4 winds met, where the land itself was something to walk around, not through. And here's the thing. The Abenaki weren't alone in that assessment. By the mid-1800s, Glastenbury had a boomtown. Logging, charcoal kilns, a small railroad. Population peaked around 240 people in 1880. By 1937, the town was officially listed at 0. Everyone left. The entire town unincorporated itself, just gave up and dissolved. And that stretch of the long trail that cuts across its shoulder, mile 21 to mile 22, that's where this story happens. New England author Joseph Cittrell would eventually name this region the Bennington Triangle. But the land had its reputation long before anyone gave it a name. November 12th, 1945. Middie Rivers was 74 years old and had spent more time on Glastenbury Mountain than most people spend in their own living rooms. He was a hunting and fishing guide, not some casual weekender who wandered off a path. This man knew every reach, every creek crossing, every game trail within 20 miles. That afternoon, Rivers was leading a group of 4 hunters back down the long trail toward camp. Standard route. Weather was cold but clear. Rivers was out front, moving faster than the rest. Maybe 50 yards ahead. They could still hear his boots crunching on the trail. And then they couldn't. The group came around the bend, and Rivers was gone. Just gone. No sign of struggle, no tracks leading off trail. Search teams combed that mountainside for weeks. They found one thing. A single rifle cartridge. Not his rifle. Just a loose cartridge, sitting on the trail where he'd been walking. Middie Rivers was never seen again. Now, you could write that off. Elderly man, rough terrain, maybe a stumble into heavy brush. Tragic, but explainable. Except, exactly 1 year and 19 days later, December 1st, 1946, Paula Welden, 18 years old, sophomore at Bennington College, told her roommate she was headed out for a walk on the long trail. Same trail. She was last seen at approximately 4 p.m., moving north on the trail near the entrance to Glastenbury Mountain. And look, this is the detail that wrecked me. An elderly couple was hiking about 100 yards behind her. They could see her. Red jacket, normal pace, moving steady. They watched her go around a bend in the trail. When they reached that same bend, maybe 30 seconds later, the trail was empty. No Paula, no sound, no red jacket anywhere. Nothing but trees and dirt and silence. But here's what nobody talks about. The search for Paula Welden was so disorganized, so catastrophically botched by local authorities, that it directly led to the creation of the Vermont State Police. An entire state law enforcement agency was founded because of what happened on that trail. Or, more accurately, because of what didn't happen during the investigation afterward. Paula Welden's body has never been found. Not in 80 years. Now, if you're still telling yourself these are just unfortunate hiking accidents, people lost in rough terrain, let me tell you about James E. Tedford. Because James Tedford wasn't on the mountain. He wasn't even outside. December 1st, 1949. Yeah, December 1st. Exactly 3 years to the day after Paula Welden disappeared. James Tedford was a veteran living at the Bennington Soldiers' Home. He'd been up visiting relatives in St. Albans, Vermont. Normal trip. He boarded a bus home that evening. Multiple passengers on that bus later confirmed, under investigation, that Tedford was in his seat during the ride. His belongings were on the luggage rack above him. An open bus schedule was sitting on his seat. When the bus pulled into its final stop at the Bennington terminal, James Tedford was not on the bus. His luggage hadn't moved. His belongings were still on the rack. But his seat was empty. No one saw him get off. No one saw him stand up. The driver confirmed that between the second-to-last stop and Bennington, James Tedford simply ceased to be a passenger. And I know how that sounds. But this was investigated. Witnesses were interviewed individually. This is documented in local records. This isn't a campfire story. This happened on a public bus in Vermont in 1949. 5 people walked into the same mile of forest. The forest kept all 5. And here's where investigators started connecting something that would later become central to one of the most controversial analyses in missing persons history. These disappearances weren't random scatter across hundreds of miles. They were concentrated, tightly. The same section, the same elevation, the same corridor of mountain. And they were about to accelerate. October 12th, 1950. Paul Jepson, 8 years old. His mother had brought him along to the family farm near Glastenbury while she tended pigs in a pen. She left Paul playing beside the truck, in sight, in open ground for roughly an hour. When she walked back, Paul was gone. He'd been wearing a red jacket, same as Paula Welden, 4 years earlier. Red jacket, same mountain, same result. Search teams deployed with bloodhounds. The dogs tracked Paul's scent to a nearby highway crossroads, and then nothing. The trail just stopped, like someone picked him up, or like he'd stopped existing at that particular point in space. 300 searchers, aircraft, tracking dogs who'd never lost a trail before. Nothing. Paul Jepson was never found. And look, the red jacket thing could be coincidence, probably is, but it stuck with investigators at the time. Same mountain, same color jacket, same vanishing act. Now, David Paulides is a former San Jose police detective who, starting in 2012, published a series of books called Missing 411. He documented what he believed were anomalous patterns in national park disappearances across North America. And one of his central findings? Clustering. Not just people going missing in parks, that happens, but people going missing in the exact same geographic pinpoints across decades. Paulides documented cases where multiple vanishings happened within impossibly tight radii, sometimes a single square mile, in places like Yosemite, the Great Smokies, Olympic National Park, Crater Lake. The Bennington Triangle matched this pattern exactly. 5 disappearances in 5 years, 1 mile corridor, same trail system. And here's the line from Paulides that I cannot shake. He has stated publicly, in interviews and in his published research, that the National Park Service maintains no centralized database of people who go missing within its parks. No master list, no single document you can FOIA that tells you how many people have vanished on federal land. We track every plane in American airspace. We tag cattle with GPS. But someone walks into a national park and never comes out? There is no comprehensive record. And here's where it gets really messed up. Paulides has said he filed FOIA requests and was told by the NPS that compiling such a list would be, and I quote, too costly. The mountain doesn't forget, it collects. And for decades, nobody was keeping count. Which brings us to the last disappearance. The one I promised you at the start. The only one where they found a body. And honestly, this might be worse than finding nothing. October 28th, 1950. 16 days after Paul Jepson vanished. Frieda Langer, 53 years old, was hiking near the Somerset Reservoir with her cousin Herbert. She was a lifelong outdoorswoman, knew Glastenbury Mountain well, had camped in that area for years. During the hike, Frieda fell into a stream and got soaked through. She told Herbert she was heading back to camp to change. Short walk, a route she could practically do blindfolded. She never arrived. The search for Frieda Langer was one of the most extensive in Vermont history at that time. 5 separate organized searches, tracking dogs, aircraft, hundreds of volunteers. They covered every square foot around the campsite, the reservoir, and the surrounding woods. Nothing. For 7 months. Nothing. Then, May 12, 1951. A group discovered Frieda Langer's remains. Not in a ravine, not buried under deadfall, not wedged in some hidden crevice that 5 search teams could have missed. Her body was lying in open ground near the Somerset Reservoir, in an area that had been walked over, searched thoroughly by multiple teams on multiple occasions. She was just there, in the open, where she hadn't been before. The condition of the remains was such that the medical examiner could not determine a cause of death. That is the official record. Cause of death, undetermined. Not exposure, not drowning, not animal attack, not trauma. Undetermined. Whatever happened to Frieda Langer left no identifiable evidence on her remains. And that is the detail that closed the mouths of investigators. Not that she was found, but where, and when, and how. 5 organized searches missed a body in an open field. And nobody in an official capacity has ever been willing to say this on record. The body was not there during those searches. Frieda Langer is the only one of the 5 whose remains were ever recovered. The other 4, Rivers, Welden, Tedford, Jepson, have never been found. Not a bone. Not a thread of clothing, not a single personal effect. In nearly 80 years, nothing. 5 people, 1 mile, 5 years, and 1 body that showed up where it couldn't have been. Dead from something nobody could name. There are rational explanations for each individual case. Of course there are. Rough terrain, hypothermia, disorientation. I'm not arguing against that. But the clustering, that's the part that keeps researchers up at night. Because it's not just Bennington. Polides documented similar clusters in parks across the continent. Points on a map where the disappearances stack on top of each other, like something beneath the soil is pulling them down. Glastenbury Mountain still stands. The long trail still crosses its shoulder. You can hike mile 21 to mile 22 tomorrow morning if you want. Plenty of people do. But the Abenaki knew. They always knew. Some land isn't empty. Some land is patient. Some places don't have history. They have an appetite. If this one stayed with you, and I think it will, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. If you want to see another story, even darker than this one, click the video on your screen right now. I'll see you there. Be careful where you